but there is no clear indication. And you have to keep in mind, in 1460, as far as I know, the Sanguotiyeni is not yet there. The Sui Hujuan is not yet there. We have the Pinghua, the simpler forms of novels. But this is probably, in terms of fictional reading, the most advanced kind of stuff you have at this moment. So to what extent they were also read by this official as providing practical hints, I don't know. Very few officials ever in their career will be in a position to find the emperor, to impose. And so, but on the other hand, of course, some of these tales may have appealed not only to a more general readership, but it may also very well have applied to parts of the bureaucracy who were upset by the power of members of the imperial family, the military families, the hereditary houses. We tend to, I mean, it's my idea when talking to my historian friends that, of course, because of our sources, we tend to perceive the Chinese state as run by bureaucrats. But the bureaucrats are only one part of the state apparatus, and at many times, certainly at the top, not necessarily the most powerful. And so the idea that, yeah, the bureaucracy should have certain representatives who should be able to lay down the line to the emperor must have had a larger appeal. I can see Chinese officials during the Wan Li reign as, my God, if that would be possible. But of course, you have to keep in mind, this is fiction. But I think it's interesting fiction, in a sense that it deals with that it focuses on an institutional issue which, I mean, let's be frank, the Chinese state to this very day, certainly on the mainland, has difficulty solving. It's my understanding that at least until today, the Communist Party absolutely rejects a division of powers and maintains that the party is basically above the law. And so at this moment, of course, there is a lot of talk about Fajie, rule by law, but there is no indication that the party is planning to put itself under the law and call for a rule of law. Of course, you would have the other problem, which in this kind of system is how do you originate law? Now, in the traditional Chinese case, the founder, every system of law needs a originating moment of law. And so in the Western tradition, in most countries, we believe that law is created by the representatives of the people together in Congress, voting on laws, instituting laws as represent the people, puts in place the laws to which itself then will be subject. In the Chinese case, you also have a story, and that is basically the founding emperor declares law, which is then binding throughout the dynasty. And you get all these wonderful, I mean, legal historians can tell you all these strange things people had to do in China, because you had to keep the law in place, and then you had to get this substatutes and substatutes to introduce changes.
Just one more question from me.
Well, among all the stories about all these judges, Baogong, Xuegong An, Yigong An, Baogong An seems to stand out uniquely with these attachés of the heroes and the gallantors uniquely. And are they surely fictive creation, or are there sources in earlier literature history that actually help the creation of these characters?
Of course, you can trace them back in fiction, but there are no historical sources. By the time we get to these ballad stories, even his wife becomes fictional. We know the surname of Baogong's, the historical Baogong's wife. She was a Dong, good, nice northern Chinese family. By this time, in these stories, she becomes Li, which is much more commonly. So that is one element. The runners and clerks in the ballad stories have conventional names that date from, which are conventional for the vernacular literature of this period. They are called Dong Chao, they are called Zhang Qian, Li Wan, and they have very conventional names. And basically they are a grumbling and incompetent lot. I mean, they are our idea of, perhaps I should not say that, but I mean, they are vainglorious, they drink a lot. The way to get them into action is to promise them more drink. When Judge Bao gives them a instruction, they claim they will do anything without problem, and then as soon as they see what they have to do, they complain bitterly about this terrible job they have to do, and they fumble and they mix it up. And when they have to arrest a woman, and she says, "Will you let me free if I do you a little favor?" They are eager enough to take her up on the offer and so on. So they are certainly not heroes, and they are certainly not gallants in this stage. This is a much more negative view. I think these runners, these clerks, these policemen are very much like the bad policemen in Sui Hu Zhuang.
Maybe you can say that about Wang Chao Ma Han, but what about Zan Zhao, Nan Xia, Zan Zhao, the Bei Xia? You know, they seem to be true heroes.
Well, I mean, yes, by the time you get to San Xia Wui, then you have a completely different set of characters. And then you see that they take over from the center stage from Judge Bao, who becomes very much on the background. But in these early stories, that's why I think we cannot just put everything together. You have to look very carefully. What is the period? What is the function? When did these texts originate? Then you have a completely different set of subsidiary characters around Judge Bao.
And also coming, I guess, at the end of the Yuan and the beginning of the Ming, the literati of the Ming, of the Yuan and also Ming had a very low opinion of the clerical tradition officials under the Yuan.
Well, of course, that's one of the differences, but I think here you have an interesting difference. Qing dynasty officials in all these bureaucratic handbooks have an extremely low opinion of their clerks and their runners and so on. But the interesting thing is, of course, when somebody like Shi Yuquan in Beijing is performing his Shi Yu Pai, he is probably performing for a sub-elite audience, in which is much more that of military men, runners, policemen, and so they become much more positive heroes, because it's very clear that the image of these policemen, these runners, these clerks in San Xia Wui is absolutely diametrically opposed to the image in the administrates